So before we start the pledge, can I ask everybody to bow our head for a moment of silence for all those who lost their lives last week in the school shooting in Brooklyn? Thank you. If you can, please turn your attention towards the flag and place your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. I just want you to think about what we just said. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Nazi Republicans strive to divide us, while the Democrats believe America is indivisible. And Republicans try to convince us that liberty and justice is for some, but not all. The Republican Party has strayed so far away from our forefathers' intent that our forefathers intended. And as our Supreme Court ruled, the president is now above the law. Well, it's all part of the plan. Project 2025 makes it easier for Trump to turn this country into a white Christian authoritarian nation. But before we get started, I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I'd like to call out on the Democratic groups that are here tonight, the presidents. We have Samantha Pools. Laura Millay and Kate DeSantis. We have Kelly Johnson, President of the and we have Vasu from the Manhasset Democrat Club. And James Hodge is from the New Long Beach. What is it called? Thank you all for coming, and if anybody is interested in some of those towns would like to join the club, you can speak to them. Okay, I would like to now introduce our and also president who has helped us put this together in a big way, the Kevin Gorman from the
I don't know if Claudia mentioned, but she's president of the Belmont America. Okay, again, I'd also like to welcome you all here, and this should be a very informative presentation, and hopefully we'll get a lot out of it. But more importantly, we need to tell our friends and neighbors all about this, because if they find out about it, some of the people that are voting for Trump may not do that anymore. Okay? So, my pleasure to introduce the various people running for office and Democratic leadership of the county. First off, we have Lisa Lynn, who's running in this district. I guess nobody really knows who she is. It's Belmore, East Meadow, Farmingdale, Hicksville, Levittown, Maricopa, Beth Page, Plainview, Salisbury, Seaford, Warrentor, and that's the district. I'm going to read it off so anybody that knows anybody in those areas could say good things. We have James Lynch. He's running in the 9th district. Also the state senate. And that is Atlantic Beach, Belmore, Cedarhurst, Elmont, Laurel Park, Franklin Square, Hewlett, Inwood, Lawrence, Long Beach, Lynbrook, Oceanside, Stewart Manor actually, Point Lookout, Valley Stream, and Woodmere. It's got the 5 towns, so there's a lot of towns. And then we have our own Ellen Letter. Francisco. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have done that. Actually, I think we want to sell, but it's Belmore, Merrick, Oceanside, Seafood, Wantagh. Okay, the next two we have is Noel Burrows. He's from the Summer District of Seattle. He has Freeport, the village of Hempstead, Roosevelt, Lakeview, and Uniontown. That's his area.
All right.
And from the Long Beach, traveling a bit, a member of the Long Beach City Council, John Bendo. MC for the Long Beach Dillon opening, I think last Saturday, did I know that? Yep. So let's see, from the Democratic Party, we have the Town of Hempstead Chair, Edgar Campbell. I saw him before. Oh well. And from a Nassau County Democratic Committee representative, was Rachel Whitmore here? No. I'm sure you're all busy out there organizing, making phone calls, and getting things done for our various candidates like we all are. Okay? That's basically it.
1199.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. Oneida Shepard, Political Director of 1199 Nassau County. So anyway, I'm going to I saw a few of our Democratic zoners here, so I'd like to just introduce them and take a little bit here. Okay. We have the Goldsteins, who are in Belmont. He also serves as one of the merit leaders. We have a gentleman who led us in the Pledge of Allegiance, Captain Devlin. He's the only one. We have Robert Young, who is the leader in the merit. And one of the leaders also in Montauk. Did I miss anybody? Hey, you're good. With that, I think I've taken enough of your time. We have a more important program to get to, and I'd like to give it to Claudia.
It's crucial for the public to recognize that a second term under Trump would not merely be a continuation of the past. It would involve enacting a strategy devised by the architects of Project 2025. 140 of them were in Trump's administration, aiming to redefine the Constitution to grant Trump singular authority over the government, bypassing congressional checks and balances, with the goal of establishing a white Christian authoritarian state. So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Jillian Gator, one of the founders of Roots to Revolution, an advocacy group dedicated to teach people about the totality of our country's history. Ms. Gator currently serves as the Associate Director of History for Achievement First Middle Schools, supporting history teachers. Ms. Gator has been delivering presentations on Project 2025, and we are privileged to have her here this evening. We are grateful that she tackled the Belt Parkway to get here. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to Jillian Gator.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Claudia and Judy, for inviting me. Brooklyn, I'm from Brooklyn, and Brooklyn technically is a part of Long Island, so I feel like I am one of you. My parents didn't pick the other suburb for us to move to. I grew up in Brooklyn and New Jersey, so I am on the other side, but I do understand the suburban life. So I'm here to talk to you about Project 2025, and I'm just going to share a little bit about what I do. So I am a teacher. I've been a teacher for 17 years. I train teachers. And a few years ago, in 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, people were asking me as a history teacher, how did America get to this point? How did we get to this place? And what do I do about it? And my friends and I started this organization called Roots to Revolution to teach people about the history of systemic racism in America. And why I've chosen to also talk a lot about Project 2025 is the underpinnings of it have everything to do with systemic racism, have everything to do with misogyny, have everything to do with homophobia, and creating a world that we don't want. We want an inclusive democracy, we want a place where everyone can flourish, and we need to fight this. And so tonight's talk is all about informing you, and then also getting out there and talking to your community about how we fight Project 2025. So I'm going to start with a little history trivia. Why look to the past when I'm worried about the future? Raise your hand if you recognize these two people. Seeing some hands. Love it. All right. My friend up front, Lorraine. Oh, come on, Lorraine. Who is this? You just recognize. Okay, who can tell me? Call it out. Call it out. And who is this? Okay. So, everyone always says Harriet Tubman, so you're not alone. The reason why you recognize Frederick Douglass is he ensured that he was the most photographed man of the 19th century, because he wanted everyone to know that he was a human being. And this is his wife, Anna Murray Douglass, his first wife. He was married twice. His second wife was a suffragist, and he was the only man at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, which was promoting women's rights, the first time women talked about the issue of suffrage. And why I wanted to start with this story is that Douglass grew up in Maryland. He was enslaved, and he taught himself how to read and write, and he believed that we were free if we were literate. Now, I don't believe that we all know how to read in this room, thankfully, and that right has been given up to us. But I think Douglass's story teaches us about the importance of education. That if we keep ourselves educated, no one can keep us down. And Douglass got his freedom. This is a lesser known part of the story because his wife financed it. She was born a free black woman, and she was able to help him get north. And why I like to share her part of the story is it reminds me that activism and freedom starts with love. It starts with love, it starts with compassion, it starts with us coming together and building connection. That's how his most powerful story got told. Something else I want to say about Douglass is he wrote the famous newspaper, the North Star. It was an abolitionist newspaper, and there were over 5,000 people who subscribed to this newspaper every month. And we will never know who those people are. They will never be in a history textbook. They will never be famous. And why I like to say that is because I believe that's us. The ordinary people who are not going to go on necessarily to be in the history textbooks, who are not going to achieve fame, but we're going to make a difference. Because Frederick Douglass alone could not end slavery. He needed those thousands of people that were subscribed to his newsletter to fight to end slavery. And Douglass went to the White House and told Abraham Lincoln that the war needed to be about emancipation. Lincoln didn't just decide that. Douglass and abolitionists told him so. And so this is why one of the things in Project 2025 is to not teach Black history. They call it CRT. It's a nice euphemism for Black history. Let's call it what it is. And this is why they don't want us to know our history. Because when I tell you this, you feel empowered. When I tell you this story, you know that our ancestors worked really hard to get us here. And that we can do the same thing for our future generations. That's why they want to suppress history. Because just like Douglass said, when you learn how to read and write, you are forever free. And so I think that it's important for us to remember his words struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom, yet depreciate agitation, are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. So I'd like for you just for a moment to shake hands with the person next to you, introduce yourself, and just talk about what's your reaction to that quote and its history. Because this is a community, and I really believe we have to fight for change in community, and we need to have fun. This is heavy stuff that we're going to talk about, and we need to have fun and do it together. Now, you're already here, so you're activists, you're involved, you're engaged, and I need you, next time you do something like this, to bring 5 more friends. Especially my Gen Z friends. Because millennials and Gen Zs are going to, if they vote, turn the outcome of the election. So let's get those little ones here. Now, something else I want to say about Gen Z. I teach college freshmen. My little college freshmen were born in 2006. And this struck me deeply because they were 2 when Barack Obama was president. So they don't know a world that isn't without Donald Trump. And we have to teach them what it means to be activists. And we have to teach them what it means to have civil discourse. And what it means to talk to our neighbors and disagree with them and still move forward and make negotiations and make deals, because that's what politics is about. And so I want to talk about some myths about activism that our young ones need to know, are myths, and we all need to acknowledge those myths to get people out and get out the vote. So one big myth is that social movements all have a hero. Raise your hand if you learned about the March on Washington and how Martin Luther King led it. Now, yeah, he did. But there were thousands of people who we had to talk to in the audience for that march to even matter. And I adore the work of Martin Luther King. I've read Letter to Birmingham Jail about 80 times because I've taught it that many times. And every time I get something out of that beautiful letter. Martin Luther King was brilliant, so I don't want to take away from his brilliance. But what I want you to know is we can't look for a hero. Because if we wait for a hero, we're never going to make change. People will say to me, why does the Black Lives Matter movement have a leader? Well, that's the point. It needs to be a collective. Because we all have to work on this together as a community. We can't wait. We can't wait for someone to come and swoop in and save us. And that's the myth that our history books teach us, is that Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks did all the saving. And that's not true. It was everybody else. It was everybody together. And so, another myth is that movements happen accidentally. Oh, Rosa was tired. So she sat down and said, whoo, I feel like I am with people today. No. Rosa Parks was part of the NAACP. She was down in the South, helping fight for women. And this is heavy, so just take a deep breath. She started her career with the NAACP, going down to Alabama, helping women who were raped by police officers on their walks home. She was in the work for a very, very long time, before the bus boycotts. And a woman who you've probably never heard of, Pauli Murray, integrated buses and integrated in 1934, 20 years before Rosa Parks sat down on a bus. And so a myth we tell about activism is that one day, black people decided they needed to fight for their rights, and all of a sudden it just happened. When every single day since the founding of this country, from the moment Thomas Jefferson said, "I am enslaving people," until this very day, black Americans have been fighting for their rights. And I mention black Americans specifically because they taught every other group of people how to fight for their rights. And so if you're looking for a way to move forward, look to the black people in the room. Because they taught women how to vote for suffrage. They taught the gay rights movement, the Indian American movement. That's who taught us and gave us our freedoms, who made the Declaration of Independence have some truth to it. And so we have to remember that. And we have to remember that social movements are not without tension. People don't like to change. It's human nature to not want to change. So when you're asking someone to change, and you say, "My friend is transgender," and that's new to them, then you're making them uncomfortable. And that's going to be tense. And that's okay. People grow when there's tension. But to pretend that we're going to get through this without having any conflict is not true. It wasn't all peaceful. Martin Luther King sent children down to Birmingham because he knew Bull Connor was the most racist cop in the country. And he said, "I want high school kids out on the street." And he said, "The reason why I want high school kids on the street is because I know this guy's going to attack them. And I know when JFK sees it on TV, he's going to say, wow, that's horrible." That's tension. That's deliberate action. That's planning. And Malcolm X disagreed with him. Malcolm X said, "I can't believe you're using children like this." So what I want to say with all these stories is that we're looking at history, we're looking at politics, we have to know there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of complications. And the bus boycotts were 16 months. It took 16 months to integrate Montgomery buses. So the fight is long. It's ongoing. And we're going to talk about March 2025 because we have to win in November, but we're not going to be able to undo the thing that these people want to do just in the next 8 weeks. We have to stay in this for the rest of our lives. And we have to help each other stay in this for the rest of our lives. Support each other and love one another because this is hard work. So let me talk a little bit about the Heritage Foundation. So the Heritage Foundation is a think tank that was started in the 1980s, and it began to support the Reagan administration. And these are some of the things that they supported: the Gulf War, the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, Guantanamo Bay interrogation techniques. They're very much always been opposed to healthcare. And the Mandate for Leadership is a 900-page policy document that outlines the goals of the next conservative president. Now, I painfully read the whole thing. Don't recommend. But I say that because I read it so you don't have to. Claudia also did, right? Didn't you read the whole thing, Claudia? Okay. All right, but she read a lot of it too, so you can ask her too. But I'm going to share some of the things about it and what you need to know. So, Donald Trump is trying to distance himself from this. We all know that's not true. And I want to talk a little bit about how this is connected. So when you're talking to people who don't like Project 2025 and they say to you, like my young cousin did, said, "Well, that's not us. That's radical. That's not what Trump really wants." And I said to him, "No, it is." So Project 2025, the Republican National Convention platform, and Agenda 47, which is on Trump's website, all have similar ideas. 270 of those ideas overlap. So he's connected. This is him hanging out on his private jet with Kevin Roberts, former president of the Heritage Foundation, who recently just stepped down because Trump is again trying to pretend that he's not connected to it. J.D. Vance wrote the foreword for Kevin Roberts' book, and many people who are talking about why J.D. Vance was picked are speculating that the reason he was picked was because he has such close ties with the Heritage Foundation. So why is the Heritage Foundation wanting to support Donald Trump. They used to be a pretty elite group to be a part of. I think they've become very radical. They recently also were saying that immigrants are allowed to vote in the United States without becoming citizens. They were just sowing disinformation. So they've taken a real far turn right, which is not their history. But the reason why they want to help Trump is because they realize that Trump kind of bumbled his way into the first presidency in 2016. He didn't get anything done. He made all these promises of racist, horrible things, but none of those racist, horrible things were actually accomplished. So here, we, the Heritage Foundation, a group of really smart policymakers, are going to help Trump get all those terrible, awful, horrible things done. Because he doesn't actually know how the government works. I doubt if you asked him what is in the Bill of Rights, couldn't tell you. So he needs a team. And the Heritage Foundation is ready to be that team. These are the 4 things that Project 2025, the pillars of it. Now, what the Republicans love to do is use coded language. So they say things like, restore the family as a centerpiece of American life and protect our children. Well, we know that's coded language. So what I'd like for you to do right now is talk to your buddies next to you and talk about what this really means. So when I say coded language, what does it really mean? So we'll do the first one together. So when they say this, what they really mean, Claudia?
It's only for married couples that can have children and not husband and wife.
Yes.
Yes. Can have children.
Male and female.
They don't recognize any kind of marriage.
Right, male and female. Now, let's also talk about a little bit more about the policy implications of that. So there are some ideas floated around that are pretty radical. That like you can expand your health insurance to people that are not on your nuclear family. That is something the Black Lives Matter group proposed. What would that mean? Well, my sister got laid off in COVID. I was married to my husband for 1 year, and he was on my health insurance. I know my sister my whole life. But when she lost her job, I couldn't put her on my health insurance. If we opened up the idea that the family is bigger than just your spouse, we can really help each other and be a real community. And that's what some groups are proposing. It's not mainstream. That's a pretty brilliant idea. So this is about marriage, but it's also about some of those other things. It's also about how, as a person with just cats, I don't count as much as someone else with kids. So that's what that means. So talk with your partners about what these 3 things actually mean. What are they coded language for? Go ahead and discuss with your partners. students practice. And the reason why I'm having you have these conversations with practice is because you're going to have conversations with people who disagree with you. And they're going to say, well, Trump just wants to give us self-governance. Trump just wants us to have our individual rights. They love America. I don't know why I'm talking in that voice. I just want to sound like scary. And you need to be able to say, ever checks and balances and established dictatorship. So you need to be able to know what these things really mean. You probably have seen the signs like, back to reading and writing. Back to reading and writing means no history and no science. So we need to make sure that we're practicing these things and knowing what they really mean. So this one too, I think this is a little bit more clear. This is about expanding militarism. There's a war in Ukraine, there's a war in Israel and Palestine, there's a war in Congo, there's a war in Sudan. The last thing we need is more war. This is about Christian nationalism, and what I want to say about that, in the 1700s, there was something called the Great Awakening, which was a movement where people learned that they could have a direct relationship with God. What that meant was I could pray to God by myself. What made that revolutionary was that it was always believed that the king was the monarch and had a direct connection to God, and that's why they had to be the monarch, because they were directly connected to him. So people like Jefferson and John Jay and Alexander Hamilton and George Washington, they said, no, people can govern themselves. We don't need a church to govern us. And so the idea, it enrages me to my core when they erase Black history and women's history, and LGBTQ history and Native American history, and I can go on and on and on and on. But it also enrages me that they bastardized the white history. Thomas Jefferson didn't want a Christian theocracy. You go down to Washington, D.C. to the Library of Congress, they have a copy of Thomas Jefferson's Quran. The man loved to read about every religion. So this is wild. They don't understand our history. They don't even care about it. And then they want to say they're patriots. It kills me as someone that decorated my dorm room in red, white, and blue. Okay. So let's talk about how they're going to establish dictatorship. So they want to give Trump complete control over the federal government with less approval and less influence from Congress. So when I nominate the Secretary of State, I don't need Congress's approval to do that. Yeah, great, not great. I sense the New York sarcasm there. They also want the military and the Justice Department to be under the power of the president without checks and balances. And the military, what I want to point out about that. So the president is commander-in-chief of the military. But the military is not loyal to the president, they are loyal to the Constitution. And the military has its own set of laws and operations and things that govern it that make it ability to defend the Constitution. They want to give Trump more power over that. Trump has said he wants to use the military against protesters, against his own citizens. And the thing that's stopping that is the military saying no. And so we have to put a lot of faith in our military, and I don't want to put that much faith in our military. I'd rather a president just says, I'm going to use the military appropriately. And he wants to they want to gut the federal bureaucracy. What that means is the State Department officials, EPA officials, all the people that work in Washington. Now, something that really stood out to me about this recently, here's a little humble brag. I just got Fulbright, which I'm really excited about. And in the Fulbright paperwork, it says you can't be kicked out of this program, well, they say it better than this, you can't be kicked out of this program for your partisanship. But when you represent us, you represent the United States. When you represent us abroad, you represent the United States. And you can't post about the Fulbright in the capacity of the government. You're an agent of the government. But we're never going to kick you out of this program because you're a Democrat or a Republican. So that is what they want to do with this. Eliminate nonpartisan civil servants and make them partisan civil servants. So I'm not going to be an employee of the State Department by doing the Fulbright, but I am going to be a representative of the State Department in some capacity when I'm on that trip with other teachers. And why this is really important, so one of my close friends helped write the National Climate Report. She was a climate scientist. And what she was explaining to me is that Congress can't keep up with the technology. So Congress passing laws, and that's why the Chevron case is so detrimental. Congress passing laws about climate science and EPA could be obsolete in 2 years. Let's think about how slow they are. And so part of the reason why we give jurisdiction to people in the Department of Ed, the EPA, the State Department, is because they are the experts. They know all about the environment. They know all about foreign policy. So let's make them make the decisions instead of Congress legislating. It's impossible. We got people running for office here. It's impossible for you, if you're running for office, to know about every single issue in deep, deep nuance. It's just impossible. That's why we have experts in the bureaucracy to help. And so we need them there. We can't cut them. And so that's a big problem with the unitary executive theory. Now, what I appreciated about Claudia's handout is she called this authoritarian rule on the handout. And that's what this is. So again, I'm giving you this specific term because this is how it's written in Project 2025, but at the end of the day, what this is consolidating power for authoritarian rule. And the Chevron case that came out of the Supreme Court and the case about Trump's immunity also paves the way for this to happen. So we also need Supreme Court reform because we can't have these things happen. Okay, so some policy recommendations that are in Project 2025, and a lot of them are on your list. Eliminating the Department of Education entirely. Trump was just saying this week. And eliminating Title I funding. Title I funding is what supports low-income schools because schools are already segregated because they are paid for by property taxes. New York City, I know we like to think we're the liberal north, New York City is the most segregated urban school district in this country. It has the most diversity in terms of the schools aren't mixed. So we can focus on the national politics, but we also need to focus right here and look in the mirror, too. But what would be catastrophic about cutting Title I funding is 15% of New York City's budget for education comes from Title I funding. So our schools would collapse. Would become overcrowded, teachers would have bigger classrooms, we're already in a national teacher shortage. I'm already teaching 34 kids in a class. So that's going to be a huge problem. He is proposing detention camps, concentration camps for immigrants. He wants to get rid of the clause in the 14th Amendment that says if you're born here, you were born an American citizen. They want to privatize TSA, which is less, it's not like as dramatic in terms of human rights and civil rights, but certainly a safety concern. Reduce the FEMA budget, cut work from the EPA, eliminate all funding for NPR and PBS, and increase surveillance of foreign journalism. Now, this one I think about, so sometimes I got to study abroad in France, and when I would read Le Monde, it would always talk about, that's their like primary newspaper in France, their liberal newspaper, but it would always talk about America in a very different way, because they're not in it. They have no stake, right? And they have a stake in America, but they don't have as much of a deep stake in America. The New York Times or Wall Street Journal does. And so sometimes I'm getting really stressed out about America, and I suggest you do this too, is I look at foreign newspapers. What does the BBC say? What does Le Monde say? And all in English now too, so it's a lot easier with the internet to do this. But what are they all saying about us? And if we get rid of that, we're really getting a lot closer to censorship. You know, he likes to call her comrade Kamala, but I think that's a lot closer to what the Russian government and other places are doing. Now, this is another one that I want to point out that's really tricky, that's going to be on people's minds. So they've been saying, we are not proposing a national abortion ban. You're actually not. What they're proposing, though, is giving embryos 14th Amendment rights. Someone remind me, what does the 14th Amendment do? Does anyone remember? Okay, we don't. Yes. Equality under the law. Equal protection under the law. The 14th Amendment was created after the Civil War to give African Americans full citizenship. It also says that if you're born here in America, you're born a citizenship. It also says that if you lead an insurrection against the government, you should be held accountable. Yeah. So if we give embryos 14th Amendment rights, you're not only saying you're going to have a national abortion ban, you're now saying that women are murderers for having an abortion, and they can be prosecuted as such. And we can use your period tracking data in court now. Or when I had, and I'll just get personal because I think we gotta talk personal, when I had a miscarriage, I went to the hospital, the doctor said to me, this isn't your fault. Just want you to know it isn't your fault. Imagine going to the hospital having a miscarriage, you're already devastated, and then you're put in handcuffs. Because you can't really tell what I did at home to have that miscarriage. And then I'm going to take your phone and your tracking app, because you're trying to get pregnant, and you're tracking your period on these apps now, and I'm going to use that in court against you. We already have a country where we spend $100,000 per person on people incarcerated and $20,000 on people in school. Do we really need to incarcerate women over miscarriages? So this is really important because they're listening to Trump. And Trump is going around saying all these things. So you need to know what it says so you can counter that. They also want to revive the Comstock laws of the 1870s. Anthony Comstock was a postal worker in the 1870s. This is, let's set the stage, 1865, the Civil War ends. Now, this is when there's a resurgence of this is when there's not a resurgence, the start of the anti-abortion movement. Why, after the Civil War, would we all of a sudden be concerned about women having abortions? Yeah, of course. There we go. Can you say that louder, please? There would be fewer white babies. So the whole reason, this is why I say it's so important to know our history, the whole start of the anti-choice, anti-abortion movement, because white men, were terrified that after black women got their freedom, after the Civil War, they were going to overpopulate, overpower, and outnumber white women and white people. So they said, we must stop women from having abortions. Now, in the 1870s, we have the Comstock laws, which is you can't disseminate information through the mail about birth control. Well, in the 1870s, there was no medication being sent in the mail. There were no pills being sent in the mail. It was pamphlets about how to track a period and how to use the rudimentary condoms that they had at the time, and all those things. But women got abortions at that time. So if we revive the Comstock laws of the 1870s, all women who are getting their medications through the mail, getting birth control pills through the mail, getting abortion medications through the mail, they now are under arrest. That's illegal. And their doctors are going to be held accountable for that as well. So when Kamala Harris says, we can't go back, that she really means it. Now, some of the other things that I think are really scary, eliminating the progressive income tax, lower the corporate tax rate, eliminate additional funding for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So Trump's also going around, I don't want to eliminate Social Security. So they're not going to eliminate what's already there. Their plan is to not allow people to pour into it anymore. Well, that's eliminating it. So that's again, we have to cut through some of this crazy rhetoric. They also want to increase foreign tariffs, which is just taxes on foreign goods. That's already going to drive up inflation. So a lot of big issues for people, rightfully so, is their wallets. And 14 Nobel Peace Prize economists said that Trump's economic policy would drive us up further in inflation. So we need to really talk about that as well with people who are concerned about that as their #1 issue, and that's fair. Now, it also wants to end interracial marriage and gay marriage. I think it's less likely that would end interracial marriage because J.D. Vance is in one. And I think I say that like it was a little bit of a joke, but I also think it's a good point to bring up with people. Do you think this man really cares about you? He had an Indian wedding, and now he's running on the party platform ticket that says they want to ban interracial marriage. What does he want? He just wants power. He doesn't care who it's with. That's not someone you want on your side. Someone who's going to flip like that, and that's what we talk about with people. And then they want to eliminate the language prohibiting gender discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender discrimination, and gender identity for the law. So Title IX, anything that says that gender discrimination is illegal will be taken out of any type of legal laws and things like that. All right, everybody take a deep breath. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about how to easily break this down. So, PBS on Sesame Street too. So we eliminate money for seeing PBS, we eliminated Elmo. Sure, Sesame Street probably got picked up by somebody else, but why are we doing that? Well, it's not an oversight. This is Lil Nas X, who is one of a hip-hop artist who's openly gay, who really pushes boundaries, who really speaks to young people, who likes to break stereotypes. And with my niece, Addison, who's now 5, which was 2, we used to watch the Not So Late Show with Elmo. And it's on at 7 p.m. And he had Lil Nas X on, and this is what Lil Nas X was wearing. Now, if you see Lil Nas X in his performances, he's a lot more provocative, but he was just wearing this nice little sequined orange shirt. And they sang, la 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 la, la 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 la, Elmo song, right? I don't know, anyone, little kids, grandkids, you don't know this is the song, Elmo song? Okay. So they were singing that together. And what it does is it makes my niece, who's white, really comfortable with black people. It makes my niece say, well, if Elmo likes black people, I can like black people, I don't need to be afraid of them, which is what was the rhetoric in the 80s and the 90s. It makes my niece comfortable with queer people. She's gonna grow up and she'll be like, oh, I remember that guy, he was singing with Elmo. The other day, crazy cat lady, here you go. I was walking my cat Sammy down the street on a harness. He loves to be outside and I won't let him walk free in Brooklyn. And I was with my niece, Addison, who's now 5, and she says to me, I hope one day, when I am married to a husband or a wife, they love cats. And my sister hates cats, so I said to her, Addison, you know you can pick someone who likes cats, right? And she's like, oh, I didn't know that. But she did know, my sister promotes LGBTQ rights, and so does my brother-in-law, that she can marry a man or a woman when she's 5. And what struck me was it rolled so easily right off her tongue. You know, I didn't have to even say, or a wife. No, she just said it. It just came right out. She's 5. And that's beautiful. And I think she's learned that from the books that she reads, and from Sesame Street, and from all these things. And that's why they want to ban Elmo. That's what CRT is about. Let's ban all the books that show 2 penguins who were male penguins raising a baby penguin. So that our kids don't grow up thinking this is normal, and it is normal. It is normal to want to marry a wife if you're a woman. That's normal. And if you know your history, you would know that there were some homoerotic letters between George Washington and the Marquis de Lafayette. So, My point is, LGBTQ people have always been around. It's not new. It's, and so this is what CRT is really about. Sesame Street is CRT for 5-year-olds. It is critical race theory. Critical race theory is about teaching people, what is in the law, and that's why it's powerful for them to use that term against us. So, I want us to help break this down for people in simpler ways so that we can understand these heavy, maniacal things that are in here. So, I just want to also simply state what Project 2025 is, so you can take these talking points back to your loved ones. It's about consolidating the power in the hands of rich white men. Who's it going to benefit? That's who's going to benefit. Not working class white men, that's for sure. And it will bring us back to the 1870s, literally. And I think we also have to talk to people about not just scaring them, but also talking about what's beautiful. Our country is beautiful. We're full of diversity. Every time I go abroad, I can't wait to come back home to New York, where I can eat food from probably 36 different countries in New York City. That's a beautiful thing. That's not true in Italy. That's not true in Italy. It's bolognese after bolognese after bolognese. And I think it's beautiful to go abroad and see that, to come back home and remember why you should love America. And we have to tell people that. These things are worth fighting for. Now, this is really powerful, and this is where my call to action comes in. When people were told about what was in Project 2025, only 16% liked it. So when people actually were told what was in it, they don't want it. America doesn't want this. And think about it. I bet you know some Trumpers, when you say, oh, my friends are gay, they're like, yeah, I don't care. It doesn't bother them. But they don't realize this. And I bet if you told them that they're trying to get rid of people's marriages, they might think differently. The other thing that's really important is 70% of Americans have never heard of what is in Project 2025. Most Americans have never heard of this. They don't know what it is. And I don't think we're doing a good enough job of explaining it to people either. So my call to action for you all know 10 people. Talk to 10 people tomorrow, this week, about what Project 2025 is, what it's all about, what's in it. Start the conversation. Now, I also think politics are about people. This picture of me and my mom and my sister when we were studying abroad, when I was studying abroad in France. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. My parents grew up in Brooklyn, in poverty, and didn't have a lot, and they just instilled in us a belief that education was possible. And I got into Lafayette College, and I was the first one in my family to go. And my mom had never left the country before I studied abroad. And she came to visit me in France. And she called me up and she said, Jill, I booked a hotel in the street. The Champs-Élysées, do you know it? Yeah. Is it safe? Yeah. My mom died of cancer when I was 22. And my father died of a heart attack when I was 16. And I say that because I really believe that my sister and I survived because we were educated. We were able to figure things out. And we had a family that really supported us, and we had a community. So I believe in Democrats because I don't believe that anyone gets through this life as a rugged individual that builds themselves up for their bootstraps. I think everybody needs a community. Everyone needs to support each other. And I view Democratic policies as such. My mom died of a specific kind of cancer called mesothelioma, which is caused by asbestos. It killed her in 9 months. It was vicious. Trump deregulated asbestos. When Biden took office again, he put workers back in the EPA, and they finally put a federal ban on asbestos. Now this is, again, that little, well, who cares about the federal bureaucracy? Who cares how many people work at the EPA? Well, because of the extra people that work at the EPA banning deadly chemicals, someone's going to get to have their mother longer than I do. And that matters. The government can save lives. We have to put things in place to protect people. And I'll leave you also with this. So raise your hand if you've heard of Shirley Chisholm. Yes! All right. A lot of people haven't heard of Shirley. This would have been her 100th birthday this year. And you might notice that this resembles the Harris Student Fund Trivia, the Harris Walls campaign. She's using the exact same font as Shirley, in a nod back to Shirley. That's deliberate too. Now, I teach college freshmen, like I said. I have 40 students this year. Not a single one of them had heard of Shirley. And they said to me, I said, what does that make you think? And they said, what else am I not learning? What else is being taught from me? And what I think is really important is that a lot of the rhetoric is that white people will get upset if they learn Black history. So I want to read you something from one of my white students with a very white name of Madison. After learning a little bit about Shirley Chisholm, I am disappointed and confused as to why the education system is failing me. Shirley was the first Black woman to be a part of the U.S. Congress and represent the Democratic Party. In all my years of taking, quote, U.S. history classes, I was never educated on the representation of Black women in our government, especially Shirley's impact. This saddens me. These important figures have contributed to the growth of our society, and unfortunately, we are being robbed of our knowledge and history. If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. This quote is so powerful. This quote by Shirley has a deeper meaning than it may appear. It emphasizes that although you may not be wanted somewhere, go anyway and show them that your voice matters and demand that it be heard. Her words are inspiring and encourage women like myself to show up and make a difference. So I just want to thank you for spending your Monday night with me. Signed up tonight. So if you talk to 10 people, now we've reached 1,300, 1,000. I'm answering you, you're not math, right? 6, 7. Okay. So, don't forget your voice amplifies.
Do you want to take some questions?
Yes, I'd be happy to take some questions. I don't know if people have to go. What time do we have until? Yes, go ahead.
So I have a cross coverage question to ask, but I noticed that whenever I try to talk to my political politics, when they hear Project 23, I was doing one of my friends, they're basically like, oh, after you see what happened. Oh, what's the worst thing to do with getting rid of federal bureaucracy? Like, our country's already like screwed up as it is. Like, you know, maybe it needs some things. Like, any kind of another country like refuses to vote and makes everything corrupt. So like, what's the point?
Yeah.
What do I say to them?
Yeah, that's an excellent question.
Can you repeat the gist?
Yeah, so his question was, I have friends that say to me, well, what difference does it make if I vote? what difference does it make if we have a Christian theocracy, or like that's never going to happen. So to the part that's like that's never going to happen, I talk about how democracy is a relationship. Democracy, laws are only as strong as we hold them accountable to. So New York, for example, has the most anti-sexual assault laws in the country, and yet our governor resigned because he sexually assaulted women. So we have to hold people accountable. We have to create a culture where that isn't the case. And democracy is a relationship. So if I'm married or in a relationship or have a friend, I don't check in with them once every 4 years. I'd be a really shit friend. You can't vote once every 4 years. You gotta vote. Where are my candidates? Stand up. My candidates. My local candidates. The major league team, right? I don't care about sports, but what do they call it? B team, the minor leagues, I don't know what the teams are called. We got all the teams, right? And people are called up off the bench. Barack Obama was a state senator. You're running for state senator, right? Yeah. Most people, you ask them, who's your state senator? I have no idea. You got to vote in those elections. 30% of people vote in primary elections. In New York State or in a very red state, that's ridiculous. And then to the point, Mayor Adams won his primary by 8,000 votes. So that's what I would say to those people. It matters. Yes?
This was a terrific presentation. This was fabulous, and there's so much information. Will this be available on your website?
I can do that, yes, and I'll also give it to Claudia to figure out if
You
it's
can review it and then find words to bring back.
Absolutely.
And did everybody get a Trump's Project 2025 bullet point? That I might have said, you can show this to all your friends who don't know what it is.
Right. And then we have another question back here. What's your question? Sorry,
I see in the news that Trump says, what's this Project 2025? I'm not affiliated with it. And people who watch that news say, why are you spewing false information? He's not associated with Project 2025. So it can't be used as a talking point because 50% of, well, not, whatever, some percent of the news says, well, Trump will go, I have no idea what that is. Oh, you don't like it? I have no idea what it is. You like it? I wrote it.
Yeah. So go ahead and answer your thoughts, and then I think also I'm going to add something there too about feelings.
I just want to say that for people
who say that, you tell them that 140 people from Trump's former administration helped write this blueprint. You tell them this project has been in the works for decades. It's 922 pages long. They've made 17 training videos to recruit 40,000 Trump loyalists to replace civil servants and government experts in their field. The Heritage Foundation handpicked the 6 justices that are on the Supreme Court with the promise to one day implement this project. And it started. Roe versus Wade is reversed. The president is given absolute immunity from criminal acts, which will give Trump the ability to implement Project 2025 without accountability. And why do you think, as Julia said, why do you think he picked Vance as the vice president? Could it be because Vance was the Heritage Foundation's choice? Could it be that Vance's radical white Christian nationalist views, along with his Yale degree, makes him the perfect puppet to end this country's democracy? In other words, they've been spending years, and 100 different conservative organizations are in on this. So would they go through that much trouble for nothing?
And tell a story too, and ask people questions. When people landed at the RNC, people said, "Welcome to Milwaukee, brought to you by the Heritage Foundation."
they pay for it.
Because they pay for it. Follow the money. The other thing I would say to people is people vote based on feelings. And something about Trump makes them feel safe. Now, I don't know what makes them feel safe. So ask them, though, do you like what's in Project 2025? And they're going to say no. So do you want to risk it? No. Yeah.
I tell people when they say that Trump doesn't know anything about 2025, or doesn't want to be associated with it, I tell them, listen, if I were an educated leader that was trying to run our country, and I was being associated with a document that I did not disagree with, I'd be damn well sure that I learned every page so I can contradict what people are saying that I agree with. He knows what's in there, and that's why he's saying he knows nothing about it. Do you want to elect a leader that's being prepared for this, that's advocating something in the mouths of others, and yet he's not willing to defend himself against that? Because he knows it's not true. That's what it's
Thank you so much. And just, I point people to primary sources. Again, I put myself in the pain of watching his campaign videos on his website, Trump's website. Well, he says it. I want to dismantle the Department of Education and leave it up to the states. He says it in his video. So give them speeches from Trump, from your guy. You know, so that's other questions that we have. Yes.
You spoke in this, and we have probably voted for independence. And if so, what was their reaction?
Yeah. So I haven't, because I get invited by people that
Repeat the
they
question. What was the question?
Oh, the question was if I got invited by Republicans or independents to speak about this. But I would love to. I would love to. So if you know other groups that would, let me talk about it, I would love to. I have been told in teacher presentations that I've done, I had a teacher say to me, LGBTQ history is hearsay. And I said to him, well, isn't all of history hearsay? Because it's all passed down. So, to your question, I try to meet people where they are. And I was listening to Jordan Kepler, the guy from The Daily Show that interviewed all the Trump supporters, and I like what he said. He said, sometimes we go into these things like we want to win. And that's not the point. We got to get people to change. So you have to sometimes concede things in order to have a healthier relationship. And so it doesn't mean conceding facts, but you have to come at it from a different way. So for example, my sister-in-law is a card-carrying member of the NRA. What a gift in marriage. And she said, the guns aren't the problem, the people are the problem. And I said, so I couldn't give her all the stats about why that's wrong. And I said, what do you think is the solution? And she said, mental health services. And I said, okay, they don't fund that either. So if we could compromise on that, yeah, let's do it.
Cars are the problem, God is
But I agree with you, but my point about concession is sometimes you gotta get people a little bit aware. And what I said to her is, I'm not gonna debate with you about how gun violence is the leading cause of children's deaths in America, but I can debate with you because you know how to use guns on what the best things to control them. Because you and I both agree that kids don't deserve to die. So that's where you gotta meet people, where their values are. All right, yes.
And that is a problem, because the media focuses on nonsense about little things about Biden, little stupid things. But I think that the media knew this was going on all these, how many years you said?
Oh, I mean, since
Whenever it started with Reagan, okay? And I feel like our media is disappointing us and just, I feel like they're not doing their job. I feel like the media should be focused on this and telling it every single day, and instead of all the nonsense we hear.
Yeah, and I think that
Yes, I had invited the media, I asked them to, for security reasons, not to publicize it, but I did
I'll tell you what, here we go. Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, invited the Klan to the White House to watch Birth of a Nation. Ronald Reagan incarcerated a huge population of the black community for the same drug that white people were using in a different form. Our country has always been racist. Trump is one of the first people to say it. It's out loud. And so my father was a recovered alcoholic. And in AA, they say the first step is admitting that you have a problem. If we're going to heal from our racist history, we have to admit we have a problem. And Trump, because he says it so directly, so out loud, allows us to point to him and say, look at that. This is what the Republican Party has always stood for. The authoritarian rule is new. The buffoonery is new. Some of the things are new. The indictments are new. But Reagan said, I wanted to fund the Federal Department of Education, and he wrote a report that was falsified saying that kids in black and brown communities underperformed white communities when the test was biased, and then defunded those schools. So is that any different than Donald J. Trump? No. So that's why I say he's a gift, because he allows us to confront it. He draws a clear line. Now, I'm not welcoming him in his racism, but when we talk about in history, there's changes and continuities. What is the continuity about Trump? Is the Republicans have always promoted racist policies, and the Democrats have to an extent too, because they were conceding. In order to get Social Security passed, Franklin Delano Roosevelt said he had to leave out sharecroppers and domestic workers. Who were the sharecroppers and domestic workers? Black men and women. So with Social Security help, that's when affirmative action was white in the 40s. So I think that we have to remember these things about our history and still fight for change. All right, I've been talking a lot. You want me to?